Hi, this is Richard and Sherelle with the Week 4 feedback video. Craig's giving the keynote in New Zealand at the Mindful Leaders Conference, so he's not with us today.
Sure. But it's been a great week with lots of really good discussion, and one topic that came up was around an article that was published in an Australian newspaper on the weekend. Not everyone will have seen it, but it had some pretty inaccurate kind of views about mindfulness. It wasn't all that flattering.
Mindfulness in the news. Look, here's the thing. The news has been talking about mindfulness for so long now, about all these amazing benefits, and of course, the way the media works, they have to find angles, don't they, to publish stuff.
Yeah.
So you've seen this dark night of the soul, you know, every now and then people have adverse reactions, so maybe mindfulness is bad. And a study that came out last year also found that I think people, men and women who did a mindfulness course had all these benefits, but men didn't say that they became happier. So all of a sudden the headline was mindfulness doesn't work for men.
No, didn't mention all the other things that men benefit from. It's just the happiness was not quite as high as it was.
Exactly.
Yeah. So things get misrepresented, distorted, don't
all
they?
the time. Perhaps they just made some, some claims based on their own experiences, and they were saying things like, that. Well, what were the comments that mindfulness is about pushing away negativity, and it's about
disconnecting
from other people and
that's
detaching from reality, and that's definitely, as I'm sure our learners know, that's the opposite really of what mindfulness is about. Mindfulness is about being more present, more connected, being with things as they are, not trying to repress things and push them away.
Exactly.
So look, the article itself, probably not worth, really going into in so much detail, but in general, I guess for our learners, I just hope that perhaps they bring maybe more of a sort of a discerning mind, having experienced mindfulness themselves. When we're reading stuff in the media, we probably just want to really trust our own experience of that.
Sure.
And if our learners do want to know what the current state of science says about mindfulness, there's an amazing book that's just come out called Altered Traits by Richie Davidson, Daniel Goleman, two key figures in the field. So that's definitely worth a look. It's 40 years of research and reviewed really well.
Sure, and a much higher quality than your average sort of newspaper article.
Definitely.
And definitely, your own experience is what counts, and people's experiences of the formal meditations this week. Lots of great accounts of what's happening and benefits that people have found in their practice, over the full course. 20 minutes, obviously, a little bit harder, a bit more challenging. There's a bit more space for mind wandering, but for a lot of people, it was easier than expected. That was great. But it's those longer pauses in the longer meditations where there is a bit more time to observe what's happening in the mind. So thoughts on that, Richard?
Well, noticing the mind wandering is the practice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point. People think, oh no, my mind wandered too much, it didn't work. No, that's the mindfulness working. If you're noticing that happening, that's exactly what's supposed to be happening. The mind's wandering all the time. We don't notice it, but when we start to meditate, and particularly if we're sitting for a longer period with those pauses, we really start to notice that, so we can learn a little bit more about that, as well as be able to bring the attention back to the chosen object when we want to.
Yeah, sure. And we put a lot of good tips around practice in one of the steps, and the recommended resources as well. I really encourage you to go back and review those steps over the next few days, and maybe in the future as well, just to really keep moving with your practice sort of post-course. Another key topic that came up was around managing your emotions. There was a lot of discussion on this step, and a lot of questions. What if an anger, strong feeling is quite legitimate? What do we do about that?
Yeah, well, look, that's one of the things that mindfulness has been shown very conclusively to help with, is managing emotions. And something like anger, it's a very useful and legitimate emotion. It tells us that something's not right in our world and it might need to be addressed. If we feel angry, someone's crossed a line, something's threatened us, and it's very useful to pay attention to that and to use it as information. So we don't want to ignore it or try to sort of avoid it, but at the same time, we don't want to get caught up in it.
Sure.
If we get caught up in those angry thoughts and reactions, and then that becomes sort of, aggression or abuse, that just causes more conflict and problems in the world.
Sure.
So instead, if we can notice the emotion that's there, recognise it for what it is, use it as information, but then respond from a more balanced, mindful place, that's going to result in much better outcomes for us and the people around us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think using that anger, the energy of it really does motivate you to act much more than if we were just complacent about it. And there's some situations where we really do need to act. If someone is in an abusive relationship, for example, we don't just accept that my partner hasn't been treating me well, we need to take some action in there. And I acknowledge that that's difficult, and you would probably need some support if that was happening to you.
Yeah.
But we're not saying you have to accept everything. Doesn't mean being okay with everything that happens in your life, but it's being able to respond to it and accept that it's happening, accept the reality of it.
Yeah, I would say accept that it's happening, and sometimes we need to accept that we need to act to actually make things right and to establish good boundaries, and mindfulness can help us with both of those things.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. How does it help us accept grief?
Accepting grief is an interesting one. I think grief is a little bit more complex than some of the standard things we talk about. You know, if we can accept, we can move on, because when you've lost someone that's really important to you, obviously that changes you, and you can't go back to how things were before. So we're accepting the reality of this situation, accepting that things are different, but hopefully also accepting that perhaps there's some strength that has come out of this as well. You know, perhaps when you lose someone really close to you, that might be one of the worst things that you will be dealing with for the rest of your life. And time will find a way to sort of heal that in a way. And having that strength, I think, can really then help you think about what's important in your life, deal with minor stresses in a much more sort of effective way, and can often bring people closer. And there's some research that showed that at least 84% of adults in one study that were grieving someone they'd lost in 12 months, they actually recognised some positive things that had happened from the event.
Some growth from
put a link to that. At the end of this step as well.
Yeah, and just being able to feel that emotion, to feel the grief, and just let it be there and to move through it without getting caught in the story of it, but without resisting it. I think that's probably the healthiest way that we can relate to something like that.
Definitely, seeing it exactly for what it is. Another one that came up around acceptance and letting go, you know, letting go of previous expectations about what we could do. You know, I used to be a great athlete or a phenomenal musician, and now that I'm a bit older and not practicing as much, you know, it's not quite as easy.
Well, that's just the nature of reality, isn't it? We get old, we get sick, we lose things that we love, and what do? Do we try to hold on to what we had before? Do we resist do we resist time and resist change, or do we just accept what's happening with our body and our lives and the things around us? And certainly when we accept and allow things to follow their natural flow, life tends to work a lot better, doesn't it?
Sure. So, again, it's accepting what is happening right now, accepting the reality for what it is, and managing that as best you can in a mindful way. Another good topic was around mindfulness at the home. It covered a lot of key things, particularly around decluttering, very popular for a lot of people, a bit challenging if not everyone in the house wants to do it.
It's a bit of a metaphor, is it? Declutter the home, declutter the mind.
Yes.
I think there might be parallel processes taking place there somehow.
Definitely. And mindful walking, you know, some beautiful examples coming up, particularly people walking by the sea or in the snow, depending on which hemisphere they're living in at the moment.
So great that we got learners all around the world, huh?
It's lovely, it really is. Yeah. And mindful eating was another popular topic, and people recognising that, you know, as a child they really would take their time with food and savour it and not be, you know, thinking about the bills and doing other things while they were doing it, whereas a lot of our adults now are recognising that they're multitasking when they're eating, they're rushing their food, and so taking some time to stop and pause and do that a little bit more slowly.
So just realising that we're doing that, and then just, you know, revisiting earlier ways of eating and walking. So
Definitely.
Good. Yeah.
And another key topic that came up this week was the benefits, you know, from long-term meditators, people that have been doing this for 10, 20 years. What sort of things can we know about them?
Well, I mean, there's the science of it, and certainly that book I was talking about before, Altered Traits, goes through this in a lot of detail. You know, that there are some very real changes in the brain that persist over time, even outside of meditation periods. So we definitely see neurological changes taking place in EEG and MRI studies. Long-term meditators also have a much healthier relationship with pain and discomfort compared to controls. Long-term meditators, when they're about to experience something painful, they don't anticipate the pain. The moment the pain's there, they feel it very fully, and the moment it's gone, that experience is gone, whereas the controls kind of get very tense and anxious before it, you know, like before going to the dentist or getting a blood test or something. That's often worse than the experience of being there. So we relate to things in a much cleaner, healthier way. Gamma as well. So, you know, the gamma levels, which is a measure of EEG wave synchrony in the brain, are 25 times greater than controls. And gamma is associated with the whole brain working together and being open to experience and really in the present moment. So another sort of neurological signature. And probably a big one is that mindfulness prevents the normal age-related cognitive decline that we see. So as we get older, the brain starts to deteriorate, but we see that long-term meditators actually experience less of that, and their brains are basically younger in old age.
Which is great, isn't it?
It's so good. I think we might have mentioned in a previous week that one of our PhD students is actually looking at mindfulness to prevent a decline into Alzheimer's. So it's very protective of the brain.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, and certainly personally for me, I mean, I've been meditating now for about 20 years. I think you've been doing about the same, right? And I just feel more balanced and present throughout the day. And I really notice days, if I miss a day of meditation, I just have a very different day. And so it's nice to have reached that tipping point. I'm somehow just a bit more balanced, more present, and just more aware of the small joyful moments throughout the day. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah,
it's great. A similar experience. I do have a fun example I can share. I first started learning about meditation in 1996 when the Grand Prix first moved to Melbourne. And it was really interesting that I was living quite near the track at that time, and I was trying to do my meditation practice, and we had noisy cars going around that track for 4 days of practice runs and the event. And the first year I was really upset about that noise disturbing my peace. The second year I planned to be away, so I was away for the weekend. I still had 2 days to put up with, and I grumbled about it. And then the third year I realised actually it's a bit of noise and I've got some study to do, and I can actually put up with that. It's only a couple of days and I'll be okay. And then the fourth year I found myself, Grand Prix came around, laughing at how upset I had gotten in the first 2 years about it, and that I could actually just recognise, okay, it's just noise. It's just a couple of days. I can deal with that and I can move on with the rest of my life.
Beautiful.
I think that's a really nice example.
That's a pressure test. That one was a great example.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we're up to the end of our final week.
We are. And so, look, this is it for the feedback videos, but it's not it for the process of learning mindfulness, really. I mean, particularly for anyone who's just started the course and it hasn't repeated it this time around. It's just the beginning. Sure. So please keep exploring the practices. You have access to them for a period of time. And of course, just keep doing the meditations and applying this in your life.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of options. You could just review the course over the next 2 weeks while it's still freely available. You might want to upgrade and review things,
An upgrade lets learners access those materials forever, right? So
sure. Yes, indefinitely. Yeah. Repeating the course in the future is an option. We're next running in May, doing the follow-up course in March around maintaining a mindful life. Or, of course, you can just simply take what you've learned from the current course and apply it in whatever way feels right for you. You don't have to do more training. This might be all that you need for now.
Yeah, and please let other people know about the course as well. If you found it interesting, there are some links below to places you might share this. You might want to just recommend the course to other people. So,
Definitely.
Yeah.
So thanks to all the learners. We've had over 11,000 comments posted so far.
Amazing.
And we're still, that was actually a couple of days ago, that latest statistic from FutureLearn. So thank you so much for your participation in the course. And we need to thank all of the team, don't we, Richard?
Yes. Much appreciated to the team and to the moderators, Jen and Sherelle.
The mentors, yes. And we wish you all the best in applying these practices in your life.
Yeah.